Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Raposo. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Siobhan Lopez. She is the Assistant Director of Media Relations at Southern New Hampshire University. Siobhan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk.
Wonderful. So special shout out to Kirk Hazlitt. He connected the two of us. We know him from the PRSA. She knows him from her college experience. So Kirk, if you're listening, I know you are. Thanks so much for the referral.
Thank you. And I owe you a lunch, Kirk. It's my turn this time.
Awesome. So, Siobhan, I did a little bit of research on you. So you have a BA in communications from Curry College, and you have worked as a reporter for about a decade until you switched to higher ed marketing, when you started working at the Assistant Director for Media Relations at Southern New Hampshire University, as I just mentioned. Let's give us a little bit of an idea, your background, and why you made the switch to higher ed.
Well, so I started in high school. I was getting interested in doing something in the TV world, whether it's TV production or in broadcast news. So I got to do that really great program for 2 years, a lot of hands-on experience. And then that's what brought me to Curry College. Very similar campus to SNHU. While we do have a very large online student population, we have a beautiful campus in New Hampshire. So the campus that I fell in love with at Curry when I was looking to go to college is very similar to that. So no accident that I ended up at a nice small New England campus. But I was attracted to Curry because of the television program and the ability to get all of that hands-on experience from day one. Had great professors, just like Kirk, as you mentioned, who I've stayed in touch with all these years later. And then I worked in news for just about 10 years, just shy of 10 years. I was a TV news reporter. I was really lucky to not have to move away like most TV news reporters do. I didn't have to go start in a small market out in Kansas or anything. I was able to stay here in New England, where I'm from. Had a really wonderful start in Worcester, Mass. And then I got to come home and work in New Hampshire. So worked at a startup station in Concord, New Hampshire for a few years, and then at the Hearst or ABC station, WMUR for, 4 years. I worked at WMUR, and then in 2020, I became a mom. And a month after I had my daughter, COVID happened. So that changed everything for everybody, right? So for me, it was looking at going back from maternity leave to a very high stress job during a global pandemic. So I went back in May of 2020 and I finished up my contract. And right before my contract ended, I was thinking about, what can I do with my skills as a reporter? I wasn't interested in going back to school quite at that time. I had a new baby. My husband's career was in flux because of the pandemic. So I was looking for something I could just jump right into. And luckily, in my role as a reporter, I worked very closely with SNHU. I would cover stories about the university. We would turn to the university for experts for different stories that were going on. So I had a really good working relationship with the media relations team that already existed here. And it really was just a team of 1 or 2 at the time. And their team grew so much during the pandemic because of the pandemic. And I was lucky enough to have that strong connection with my now boss that I was able to reach out to her on Twitter, of all places. I slid into her DMs, for lack of a better phrase, and just said, "Hey, I'm thinking about leaving news. I love SNHU. Let me know if you have, any openings that you think I might be good for." got really lucky that, so that was September of 2020. By February of 2021, they had added a new position, my position, to the team. And I was really lucky out of a pretty big candidate pool to get the job and now be able to work for this amazing university that I've just admired from afar, but also, we covered them during the pandemic, which is an interesting thing that I have, videos of me talking about SNHU as a reporter, and now I am that person who
Yeah.
is the spokesperson. It is pretty interesting for it all to come full circle, but for me, for what it really was about working in higher ed in general, but to work at SNHU specifically, it was getting to witness just how incredible our commencement ceremonies are. So I got sent as a reporter to cover, not so much cover the commencement. I got sent because the speaker that year was running for president. And in New Hampshire, we care very much about our primaries and people who run for president. So I got sent to cover the speaker. And in talking to my now boss, she had all these incredible stories about these real people, about these adult learners who got these degrees despite raising kids and, medical issues that they've worked through. And I just stood in this arena and looked at these thousands of graduates and tens of thousands of their family members. And I just had this like aha moment of, this is incredible. Like graduating college in general is an incredible milestone. It's amazing, especially, for traditional age students. But to see these adults who had their kids with them crossing the stage, like goosebumps talking about it. And I've been in this work now for a few years. So it was witnessing a commencement ceremony at SNHU that really just solidified it for me that I need to work in higher ed and I would love to work at SNHU. So 2.5 years later, I am fully in and really lucky to have had this position get created just at the same time that I was looking to shift careers.
Yeah, I was one of those adult learners. I graduated at the age of 39. It's a powerful thing to walk that stage as a dad when your kid is up in the stage, in the
Nothing
stands.
like it. It's amazing.
Nothing like it. But it also shows the power of, it's not always what you know, it's who you know, that you got the opportunity in this big pool. But then again, it's also what you know, because you were so involved with the university. And I'm sure that you left a positive impact as an outsider, as a reporter, with the people on the media team. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought you in, if you would have been nasty and hardball questions and stuff like that, making them try to look bad. You did the right way. You did it the right way. You got rewarded for it. And here we are today on this podcast talking about your story. So what we're going to focus on, though, is higher ed marketers and how they can earn media placement. Very important for social proof. So what strategies can you suggest or tell marketers how they should identify some of these connections that they can build with the most relevant journalists and media outlets for their institution? Should they stay local or should they go broad, get on the Today Show? What do you think?
Ooh, such a good question. I'm a little biased. So my first thing I would say, especially on more of the PR side and the earned media side, I would say hire journalists, hire former journalists, hire current journalists. Easy for me to say as a former journalist myself, but we come with such a different experience and such a specific set of skills that is just such a secret weapon almost, where I talk like a reporter, I think like a reporter, I know what specifically a TV reporter, I know what they need, I know what they're looking for, I know what their bosses are demanding of them and their deadlines. We're just really great storytellers. We can identify a really great story and we really know how to bring all the pieces together. And I think that's one of the things I've been really lucky to be able to bring to my team. I'm always learning from the people on my team. SNHU is very big, and just higher ed in general, it's just there's a lot to learn. So I'm always learning from them in about those sort of things, and then I get to bring this unique perspective to the table. I think when you're looking at, trying to pitch a story, for example, it's important to know who you're pitching to, right? So you don't want to just blast out a story idea to just anybody and everybody. You really want to make sure you're targeting reporters who care about what you're talking about, that their audience cares what you're talking about. So, it's important it kind of also goes back to what you mentioned about, my relationship with my now boss, that we were able to have that good working relationship. It's because we had that mutual respect for each other. So, I respected her work in the sense that I knew she was charged with, protecting the university's reputation and, how people view SNHU. And I was charged with telling whatever that story was. So, for example, if it was the university's decision to stay remote during COVID when some other schools were starting to come back in person, I actually covered that particular story. So she knows that it's part of my responsibility to tell that story, to get a student perspective, to also tell the university's perspective. So to have that balance. So there was always that mutual respect, and that's what a former reporter can really bring to your team is because of that shared understanding of where a reporter's coming from and, their deadlines. We know how to best rally our troops, get our messaging together, and get it out. As far as where to pitch, who to pitch to, I think it really depends on the story, right? So first you need to be a consumer of whatever media it is that you're pitching to. So if it's a higher ed trade, be reading their stories, be reading, overall, but then specific reporters, understand their beats and what they're writing about. For us, we do a lot of that hyper local pitching with around commencement time. We have this really great system where we send out a survey to students when they're getting ready to register for commencement, asking them to share some of their story with us. And we find students that way. We also go through advisors to learn more about some of our really amazing students and find out who's willing to share their story. And through that, so twice a year, we have thousands of students graduate. We're able to select some of these students who are willing to share, who have really great stories. We interview them at commencement. We follow them around with a videographer, get B-roll of them crossing the stage, getting their diploma, nice, beautiful still shots. And then we package that all up to send to reporters. So we're targeting, a good example is we had this amazing woman this past fall. She was 63 years old, drove a semi-truck that she runs a business with her husband across the country, earned her degree at rest stops from the cab of her truck on her laptop in 48 states. She's incredible. 33 grandkids, 8 kids, 12 great grandkids, like just so many parts of her story were just so amazing. And then on top of that, just a beautiful, amazing, lovely person that we love talking to. So when we were pitching her story in particular, she's from Las Vegas. So we looked at specific outlets, reporters in Las Vegas who would be interested in her story. And we were lucky in this situation that her name happened to be Robin Roberts, different spelling than the Good Morning America anchor. But we used that to our advantage in the situation and targeted, I looked for specific producers at Good Morning America who seemed to work with Robin Roberts a lot, who tweeted about her a lot or shared a lot of her content. So it wasn't just like send it to like whatever the general GMA news tip email is. Like we really tried to find the right producer. And then we included that little nugget of information that like not that Robin Roberts, to make sure in the headline, in that first line of the pitch that they could see, ooh, there's something that we will be interested in here. So that's an example where like, that's not always going to happen. You're not always going to be pitching a student with the same name as somebody at the particular outlet you're looking at. But we sent that one nationally, we sent it locally, and we saw success in both fields there. We were able to get that Good Morning America pickup. World News Tonight ended up doing their own version of it. So really just like understanding the story that you're looking to tell, believing in it, and then knowing who's going to care about this, what audience, what reporters, what outlets, and then send it out that way. So yeah, really lucky with that one. I think Robin's story got somewhere around 600 mentions of SNHU in the media from all the pickups of that one. So just a great excuse to stay in touch with her too, because she's just been so inspirational to all of us.
Absolutely. Beautiful social proof. Well done to not just go on a website and see where the media pitch email is and send it there, because that inbox is just flooding over with stuff, right? You want to, like you said, go to the one and know the reporter's beat. And if it is on the same wavelength, then your story, you have a better chance of it getting picked up. And also what you said is you have to package the story up, make it as easy as possible for the reporters, do the legwork for them. So all they have to do is verify and then pick it up, right? Because they're busy enough. It's not like they're going to write. Yeah, they're not going to write your story for you. But pitching, let's talk about press releases. Do people still read press releases these days?
Anything for me. So coming from the news world, right? I just had this assumption that people who work in PR, media relations, that's all they do. They write press releases, they send press releases, and then they're just sitting around waiting for my phone call, basically, is like the reporter's perspective of it, right? Especially as a weekend reporter, I would reach out to somebody in media relations department and be like, come on, just like respond to me. But I think that press releases are important for a specific goal, right? So to speak as a former journalist, if a press release is not timely, if it's not news, a lot of times press releases get sent out that have no new information about it. Just somebody somewhere in that company decided we need to put out a press release. So it was a bit of a surprise for me when I made that career transition to see, how few press releases we do, but now it makes sense to me. I understand why. We reserve press releases for, big announcements. Just this past December, we announced that our longtime president will be stepping down from his role as president in this coming summer in June. So that's something we'll do a press release about. Big announcements, for historical reasons. I know before I started there during COVID in particular, a lot of press releases were going out because there was so much information. It was so fast moving. It needed to reach bigger audiences. And even more rarely than doing press releases, do we ever put a press release out on the wire. So we're very rarely doing just like a big blast. We just don't see a lot of value in putting out our information and our news that way. But even though we're not doing a ton of press releases, we are churning out plenty of content, right? So we look for different ways to put our own story out on our own website. We write news briefs that some people might do press releases for, but we call them briefs. We just, whether it's to announce a recognition for the university, or if somebody in a specific department is being honored for something, we can have our own newsroom with our own content that can be found by a reporter, but it's not necessarily something that we are specifically pitching out or sharing. But there's just so many ways to tell your own story through your own channel, and a lot of ways it could make, we mentioned before, the reporter's job easier. If they see your own article on your website that looks like a news article, because if it's written by a former reporter, they might be more likely to either take your story and repost it, or that might spark an idea for them to reach out and say, hey, I want to interview that person quoted in this article you wrote. So you have a lot of control over the message in that way. But yeah, press releases, I think, are more formal, more for announcements, and you can be a little more creative in some of the other ways you share your story.
Yeah, and that's where the argument of owned land and rented land comes in as well, right? Because if you send it out to the news and it's on their rented land, and it appears on their website, but it could be taken away any day. But if you have it on your own website, you own that property, and then if they share it, then kudos to you, and there's an extra benefit there. But at least you have it. You already have your audience that you built, that trust that you built with your stakeholders, and they're going to come to you anyways if you optimize it in the right way and push it out through emails. Going to share a quick story about a rookie mistake that I made recently, sending out my first press release for my company. So we had the same situation. It was like, am I going to go through a newswire? And I thought to myself, no, because the publication where this is probably going to get picked up, none of our audience is going to be there anyway. So I send out stuff, my press release, to Inside Higher Ed, Chronicles of Higher Education, all the outlets where there are the higher ed folks. our target audience is reading. But the thing was, it was about our user conference. It's a higher ed digital conference for marketers and web professionals. And I'm like in charge of this thing. So I think it's the best thing since sliced bread in Q1, right? Everybody should know about this. So I send it out to everybody in the media that is in higher ed. But I went through the link or the email address on the website, like news inquiries, send it there. I've heard nothing back, right? Obviously, because first of all, it was promotional for my company selling tickets for an event, right? So that's not really a story. It's more like, hey, we have this event coming up. It's probably not going to get picked up if it's not this huge thing. And second of all, I should have gone directly to the reporters. So one outlet did pick it up, and it was Volt Higher Education, Volt magazine. They picked it up, but it's because I have a personal relationship with the editor-in-chief, and they wanted to do a case study on one of our clients. And I said, hey, by the way, we have this conference. And they said, hey, send it over, we'll send it out, right? But that's how I got in. But the regular way through the website, trying to pitch a press release, it just didn't work. Not for me, at least, because it was a story that was not about value adding. I mean, it gave value through, hey, here's our conference you may be interested in, but it wasn't like a story like the one you shared with the lady who did got her degree in her 60s on at the truck stop. That's like something people want to read about. It's inspiring, not salesy.
Yeah.
So.
And I think there is some space too, though, to send those sort of things to media, right? Like if it's an event that you think that their readers might be interested in, I think it's just a way of, it's all how you frame it, right? So as long as you're not trying to pitch this as a news story, if you're just saying, hey, if you have a calendar of upcoming conferences or anything that your readers might be interested in, a lot of places have that on their website. They have, upcoming events or higher ed events. So I think it's all of like understanding and making it clear that you understand what you're pitching, that this isn't headline news, but this might have some value to your readers or your audience. I think as long as you're acknowledging what it is that you're sharing, I think that they can respect that and find a place for it sometimes.
Absolutely. And I actually gave one of the reporters, I told him, the editor-in-chief, I said, hey, I'm going to give you a comp ticket. You can give it to one of your reporters, so the reporter gets free access to our conference, higher ed conference, and then they can check it out, and say maybe they write up a little news article about that particular session or conference that they were able to go into. And he seemed interested in it, so we'll see what happens. But what are some of the common pitfalls when seeking earned media placements in the higher ed sector? What have you seen?
I think it goes to what we were just talking about I think it's true for any sector. I don't think it's higher ed specific, but I think it comes down to that first rule of communication is know your audience. So when you're pitching a story, you want to know your immediate audience is the reporter you're pitching to or the outlet you're pitching to. So you want to make sure that your pitch is personalized to that reporter. You don't want to just say, good morning. You want to say, good morning, Chris. And you want to make sure that you're keeping in mind that, yes, they're your immediate audience, but really the audience is their audience. So you need to, in your pitch, you don't have to just come out and say, I think your readers would enjoy this. It's just knowing that what you're sharing, how you're framing it, that they can see, oh yeah, this is exactly what our readers care about. Right now, I think in higher ed, right, everybody is talking about FAFSA. And if that's a situation where you have an expert that can talk about that, they know that their audience is interested in that topic. So you want to make sure you're not over pitching. You don't want to go to the same reporter all the time. You want to just pitch things that are relevant to their work. So, if they're a technology and innovation reporter, you don't want to send them a story about, enrollment. It might not have anything to do with their beat. So I think the other thing too is, and it's where I'm really lucky with my background that I can think like a reporter. I got a checklist during one of my first internships outside of college. I saved it. It's laminated. It's a reporter checklist that it's all the questions that a reporter should be asking when they are putting a story together. So I have these questions in my head when I'm pitching a story, right? Why is my story important? How does this story affect people? So shout out to Kelly Runyon at WEIU at Eastern Illinois University for this checklist that, goodness, 10 plus years later, I still have and use in another career. So it's really just, understanding your story and making sure that you know who you're pitching to. You make it clear that you know who you're talking to, but also just keeping everything very short, concise. Just what do they need to know? And then, any follow-ups can happen after.
Yeah, and be easy to work with, right? And likable. Because let's say when I pitched you my podcast, when I asked you to come on the show, and we came up with a date in January, but something came up for you, right? And you have to be moldable, flexible, right? You cannot be pressuring the person who will potentially do a favor for you in quotation marks, right? So you got to go along with the beat. And if it doesn't happen this time, don't upset that person, because you may go back the next time with another story. And if they have a bad taste in their mouth from the last experience you had with you, they're probably going to ignore your email or phone call going forward. So always look at the the open picture, long picture, the far picture. I don't know what to say, how to call it,
Yeah,
but
the big picture.
the
Yeah.
big picture. Yes, I
Yeah.
am originally from Germany, so lost in translation right here. So
I was going to say, I know that English is your second language
Yes.
because when you asked me to do the podcast, of course, I watched at least one episode and listened and looked you up a little bit. So yes, no, I'm
Yes.
aware.
Okay, very good, very good. So sometimes it comes out. I try to hide it well, but for the listeners, English is my second language. Anyways, let's keep going with this podcast. So, how do you measure the impact of a successful earned media campaign? What are some of the indicators that are most valuable?
So there's a lot of great tools out there that you can use for media monitoring. It helps you keep track of who's talking about your university. A lot of them also capture social mentions, so not just hits in the media, but also what reporters are talking about you on, Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere else. And you can use these tools to create reports, right? So within those reports, you can see where your story was picked up, how many times it was picked up. You can just do the more broad capture of how many times has your university been mentioned in the media in the past 7 days, in the past month. So we do weekly reports where we pull some metrics. Really we're most interested in the reach of a certain story, how many hits is this getting, how many mentions is this getting. Sentiment can be measured. It's not always super accurate the way they measure it, but whether a story about your university is negative or positive. So we pull weekly reports so that we can show our leadership, we can show our bigger comms team and also the social teams. We can show them where we're being mentioned. We can see and pick out which were placements that we made happen and which ones were just, organic mentions of the university. And these tools are also super important for searching for outlets, reporters, building media lists, sending pitches through some of these. A lot of times I tend to send through my email, even when we're doing, when we're around commencement time and pitching out student stories to like multiple outlets per story. I still like the control of doing it via email, and I know that it's getting to them, and I know it doesn't look spammy or anything. But that's just personal preference. I mean, they have really great tools that you can send out to a bunch of reporters at the same time. But yeah, really just measuring that reach, the sentiment, and just, getting an idea of where you're being mentioned. And then that can be used, those metrics can be used to not just show who's talking and how they're talking about your university, but to show your leadership, this is the work we're doing. This is the work we've done in the past year. Year over year, this is how the numbers have changed. And it can be a really great tool to advocate for more resources for your team, whether that be more tools and software or more manpower. So I think it's important to track all of that for so many different reasons.
Yeah, 100%. I like that you mentioned the social mentions, because a lot of times people say, like, let me get in the New York Times or Washington Post, right? This is like the big thing that I want. And sometimes these social mention, even if a reporter just comments on your post, they may go viral because they have such a large following that it appears in somebody else's feed. For example, I posted something on identifying non-traditional students, and an author that used to appear on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah. She commented on it. She said, I like some of your stuff, but then she gave a counter argument to what I said. But her followers, they were all chiming in and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? What happened here, right? All of a sudden I have this, all of a sudden I started to feel controversial, right? So because this person commented on it, this post blew up and got all these views, and people that I never heard of showing up on my feed, right? So this is always this stuff, like, you don't have to be directly publish on their site, just if they engage with your stuff, that sometimes helps you go viral in a sense. That
We had a similar situation, and it can go either way, right? It can go
Mhm.
in a good way or a bad way.
Mhm.
We had a great luck, I'll say. I mean, people try to give me credit for this tweet. I certainly overthought it to make sure it fit all the characters before I hit send. But we had, and it's also, again, like, credit to our amazing students. Their stories are so easy to tell because they're so amazing. We had a singer on Broadway who during the pandemic decided to go back and finally finish that degree. So she enrolled with us online, earned her psychology degree during the pandemic because Broadway was shut down. And by the time she had finished, Broadway had opened up again. So we had kind of caught wind of this because of social media. She had posted, her castmates had thrown a surprise little party in their dressing room with like blue and yellow balloons for SNHU. And we were like, this is amazing. Let's surprise her on stage with a diploma. So our president and our comms team, I didn't go. I was pregnant, newly pregnant with my second child, and it was still kind of COVID time. I didn't want to travel, but my boss, our president, traveled with a videographer, and they surprised her on stage. We worked with the company, the stage company, to coordinate everything, and then I ended up tweeting the video of the surprise happening. They just happened to send it to me here in New Hampshire, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to tweet this 10, 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night, and my tweet got retweeted by Sarah Bareilles, who singer-songwriter, also on Broadway, and just she retweeted it. A few other people with just giant followings interacted with it, retweeted it, and then from that, it helped us get national coverage for that story. So it's just amazing to see how, like, a tweet or a post on social media can, because of people who interact with it, can really take off. So yeah,
That's
it's
right.
amazing.
That's the importance of social listening. If you wouldn't have done that, you would have never found out about that surprise party.
Right.
Instead,
Yeah.
Let's bring the episode to a close. Before we do, let's talk about the importance of building long-term relationships with media professionals. Because how do you not go in there with a hidden agenda to make friends with somebody just to get something out of them, to actually make it? I mean, I say friends, they're not your friends, but make it a professional relationship that is mutually beneficial, not just one-sided. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that just comes down to the relationship building, and just like you said, you're not friends, but you need to work with specifically, any trade. So if we're talking about higher ed specifically, the higher ed trades, you're going to work with them a lot,
Mhm.
whether they're coming to you for a request or you're trying to pitch to them. So I think it just comes down again to that mutual respect for the work. So understanding their deadlines, their needs, their wants, understanding that they might have an idea of the story in their head, but finding a way to make sure you're telling your story the way you want it to be told, giving the information, the data, offering the experts that you want offered, that you trust and are media trained. So it's kind of this like delicate dance of trying to be a good partner, I'll say. Like, that's a little too similar as to friends. But just to be a resource, to be a good resource, to understand you're writing about this, it's relevant, we are relevant to the conversation. How can we be helpful if possible? And that's one thing, it's in our team, we always try to be as helpful as possible. So whether that is answering questions timely, setting an interview up quickly, meeting their deadlines, and then also if we feel like they're not understanding how SNHU fits into that story, or we feel like, because a lot of times because SNHU is so big and we're online and campus, there's a lot that gets lost, I think, about us. There's a lot of like apples and oranges comparisons. So making sure that we're advocating for our own story that needs to be told, but not doing it in a way you never want to tell a reporter what their story is, or that what they're doing is not a story. We might have those conversations in our own heads, or you never know. But that's not up to you, right? They were either assigned that story or they are writing that story either way. So it just really comes down to that respecting each other's work and understanding that, you know, they have a job to do, you have a job to do, and how best can we do this so that we can keep working together in the future?
Absolutely. That possibly answers my final question, but we're still going to ask it. What is one important lesson that you have learned working with the media on the other side now as a higher professional that you can share with the audience?
I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but really, I think for me, it's just understanding that the learning is never going to stop on either side of this situation, right? It's never going to stop for the reporters. That's part of why they're journalists. They love to learn. They're always asking questions. And for me, having changed careers especially, the learning's never going to stop. I consider myself still very new to higher ed, even though I've been in this space for almost 3 years now. But compared to some of my colleagues and others in this industry, I mean, I am still brand spanking new. So just understanding that, giving myself some grace that I'm not going to know every single thing. I might get a media request and not fully understand the full scope of the story. So to give myself that time to understand, you can put in the work and research and figure this out, but to just stay plugged in. So especially with that career change, it has been so important for me to understand how important it is to be in the loop, not just with news in general, but with what these specific outlets and specific reporters are writing about. So I understand how to pitch to them, how to talk to them, what they're writing about. So that's been really the most important thing for me, is understanding that. I mean, the irony, like I work in higher ed, of course, I'm going to be learning all the time, but just reminding myself that I don't know everything, they don't know everything. How can we all work together best?
Exactly. Always learning. That's the thing as a career change. I'm a career changer as well. And, you know, it served me well.
We're crushing it. Look at us. We're doing great.
Two heroes on the same podcast.
Right.
Siobhan, thank you so much for being a part of this. How can people connect with you if they want to learn more about you or ask you some questions?
Oh, of course. If you can spell my name, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Good luck. It's a hard one to spell. I will forever call it Twitter, so don't come at me for not calling it X. But you can find me on social media. Just Google me. You'll find me. Not too many Siobhan Lopez's out there, but there's a few.
Yes, I'll tag you in the recap so people will find you for sure on LinkedIn. Siobhan, thank you so much for being a part of the show. This was very enriching. Helped me a lot, and I know it will help the audience as well.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate the invitation. Thanks so much.
You got it. Take care.
You too.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the show today. If you enjoyed it, don't keep it to yourself. Share with your friends in your network. And if you have a moment, I would really appreciate a review of the podcast. That'll help other people find the show as well. Tune in every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. when I release another episode. Take care now. Have a good one, friends.